have actually no fear of snakes. That's acting.
Indiana Jones may have dodged rolling boulders and flying bullets, but he couldn't outrun this one. After decades of rewatches, fan theories, and behind-the-scenes deep dives, a glaring mistake has finally come to light, and it's been hiding in plain sight. Among 20 jaw-dropping facts from the making of Raiders of the Lost Ark, one stands out not for how it was made, but for how it slipped through. It's not the snakes, not the spiders, and not even the exploding face. So what did everyone miss? Let's take a closer look. Dysentery changed cinema. The scene was supposed to be a grand showdown. Indy with his whip, the swordsman with his blade, and a crowd of onlookers bracing for an epic fight. Costumes were ready. Choreography was mapped out. The swordsman had trained for days, prepared to deliver a dazzling display of swordplay. But there was just one major problem. Harrison Ford was too sick to stand, let alone duel. Struck down by a violent case of dysentery while filming in the blistering heat of Tunisia, Ford was running on fumes. He was dehydrated, exhausted, and barely able to keep himself upright. But what are we going to do? Shoot the action sequence all high energy, but feel like death while doing so because we can't come up with any other idea. Ford offered an absurd idea to the whole team. What if I just shoot him? But it was still paled into the great moment Spielberg saw it and agreed to give it a try. Swordsman flourished his sword. Indy, true to form, pulled out his gun and finished the fight in a single unreasonable shot, too tired to care. The crew roared with laughter. Simplicity, timing, and subversion of expectations were all perfect. From what was supposed to have been a long action stunt came one of the most quotable and famous moments in film history. That one unscripted moment of desperation and stomach upset changed the whole angle of how spontaneity could serve character and comedy. Spielberg left in the take as audiences relished the moment. A reminder, even in the bad days, to show that real movie magic can come through spontaneous inspiration. In fact, some of the most memorable moments prove not to be planned at all, but instead come from instinct, improv, and having too much of an intestinal urgency. Keep your jaw dropped, because the next one proves just how far fans will go. Kids remade the whole film. What would you do if your favorite movie was so good you couldn't just watch it? You had to remake it. That's exactly what happened to three kids from Mississippi. Eric Zala, Chris Strompoulos, and Jason Lamb were so obsessed with Raiders of the Lost Ark that they set out to recreate the entire film, scene by scene, using nothing more than a VHS camcorder, homemade props, and the wild energy only kids can bring. Each summer for 7 years, they kept going. No crew, no budget, just passion and a lot of duct tape. What these three dedicated guys did was altogether different. Fireworks provided the pyrotechnic effects, while cassette tapes provided the soundtrack. Their costumes were wardrobe throw-offs, thrift shop finds, or created out of sheer spontaneity. They leaped off furniture, staged elaborate stunts, and even tried some crazy action sequences in their backyard. As they got older, production values improved, but the spirit remained faithful to three friends who loved a movie that slowly became one of the most ambitious fan films ever made, albeit without their own inkling about it. By the time they were mature, only one key scene had remained to be shot for their almost complete shot-for-shot remake of Raiders. The story fell into the hands of Steven Spielberg, who saw what these three had felt and was moved so much that he helped them fund the last missing piece of their endeavor. It became legendary within the film community, proving thus that great stories can grow out of the most unusual places. In this case, a garage in Mississippi. Their remake was not just a tribute to inspiration, though. It was living proof of the magic of inspiration's length. Born on a beach. Indiana Jones wasn't created in a Hollywood office or at a writer's table. He was born in the sand. After being turned down to direct a James Bond film, Steven Spielberg found himself walking along a beach with George Lucas, venting his frustration. Spielberg confessed he still wanted to make a globe-trotting adventure with big stakes and a mythic feel. Lucas paused, then offered an idea he had been quietly holding on to. An archaeologist hero with a whip, not a gun, grit instead of glamour, and a sense of danger pulled from biblical legend. There was no script, no formal pitch to endear them all, just the rousing, gut instinct that something big was brewing. Lucas sketched out the rough outline of this very rough character, and Spielberg was totally hooked. The two made a bond there on that beach. No studio meddling, no years of development. It would be fun, fast, and their completely own. That sunshine conversation would spark a collaboration to grease the wheels and build one of the most iconic adventure movies in history. It was not the finished version of a clearly developed idea that made the moment so powerful. Instead, it was the frustration of the creative process prior that led to this. The two visionary filmmakers were tired of waiting on approval, so they trusted their instincts and each other. And that idea became Indiana Jones, not born in a pitch meeting, but in a moment of raw inspiration between friends. What began with a conversation by the beach became a launch site for a legendary film, almost Tom Celich. Harrison Ford may be synonymous with Indiana Jones today, but he was far from the first pick. When casting began for Raiders of the Lost Ark, Steven Spielberg hesitated to use Ford, fearing audiences would just see Han Solo in a fedora. Determined to find someone fresh, the team auditioned dozens of actors. One name quickly rose to the top: Tom Celich. With his commanding presence, rugged charisma, and that iconic mustache, Celich looked every bit the daring adventurer. He even did a full screen test in costume, hat, whip, and all, and nailed it. The studio was convinced. He was their Indiana Jones. But fate soon turned the tables. Celich was blocked by CBS due to his contract regarding Magnum PI, and despite Celich's good faith effort to be released, the network refused. The one role of a lifetime slipped right through his fingers. Ding dong! And with each passing hour, the production was still cut thin, without any star locked in. And Spielberg returned to an older thought. What about Harrison Ford, after all? He turned to Lucas and said, "I still think Harrison's the guy." This time, Lucas agreed. Ford was extended the offer just 3 weeks before production began, and, well, the rest is history. Hollywood folklore goes that Tom Celich had the part, the looks, and studio support, but his TV contract kept him from the gig. Meanwhile, Ford, who had initially been passed over just to avoid a redundant use, had come in last minute to give a performance that, in part, came to define a genre. Hence, what was Plan B became Fate. And somewhere in an alternate cinematic universe, there is a very different Indy, mustache and all. Indiana Jones, not Smith. Before Indiana Jones became a cinematic icon, he nearly had a very different and much clunkier name: Indiana Smith. George Lucas originally pitched the character with that surname, believing it echoed the old-school adventure serials that inspired the film. But when Lucas brought the idea to Steven Spielberg, the reaction was lukewarm. Spielberg felt Smith was too plain, too pedestrian, more like a next-door neighbor than a globe-trotting archaeologist. It didn't carry the weight or flair needed for a legendary hero. The decision had been kept limited. The two filmmakers valued a few ideas and circulated names like Montana, Dakota, and Wyoming, all trying to capture the adventurous essence they imagined. But it never came together. They knew they had a really good character. His name just wasn't quite right. It lacked the edge, the punch, that certain spark that would ignite instant recall amongst the audience. The unfortunate part wasn't about the name Indiana. Rather, it was really something about Smith. Then suddenly, the fix came, and it has changed everything. The simple change was to change Smith into Jones. With that one change, the name suddenly surged with character. Indiana Jones had rhythm, a sense of mystery, and an aura of myth. Immediately, Spielberg loved it. The name sounded good for a character emerging from ancient temples and snake-ridden tombs. Just like that, the character visual had clicked. Indiana Jones resonated even beyond an appealing title. It felt like an idea that would strum universal chords of every man's legend. Spielberg's secret weapon. Filming Raiders of the Lost Ark in the scorching deserts of Tunisia wasn't just tough. It was miserable. With temperatures hitting 130°C and flies swarming the set, it didn't take long for the local food to start causing chaos. Cast and crew members, including Harrison Ford and George Lucas, were dropping like flies, laid out by food poisoning, vomiting, and severe exhaustion. At one point, production slowed dramatically as sick team members struggled just to stay on their feet between takes. However, there was one guy who remained miraculously healthy throughout: Steven Spielberg, and his unlikely secret? Spaghetti-O. Instead of trying out the local food, Spielberg brought his own supply of canned pasta. Hundreds of cans, in fact. All other crew members placed their bets on the risky foreign dishes. But Spielberg stuck to his pre-packed comfort food. It was not exactly five-star cuisine, but it kept him upright, focused, and functioning, which was all that mattered. The Spaghetti-O survival kit sounds totally crazy, but as far as low-tech decisions go, it was one of the best decisions made during that grueling shoot, where hygiene was suspect and falling sick was all but guaranteed. Opting for a simple, sealed food source was sheer brilliance. Spaghetti-O became a saving grace for Spielberg, so that the film could keep rolling when a whole lot of other guys couldn't. Sometimes it's not the genius behind the camera, it's the genius from the can. Torn ligament, no pause. After barely surviving a bout of dysentery on the Raiders of the Lost Ark set, Harrison Ford's troubles weren't over. Just days later, while performing one of the film's intense action sequences, Ford miscalculated a landing during a jump and tore a ligament in his knee. The injury was serious. His knee swelled, his mobility was compromised, and the pain was constant. A doctor on set strongly recommended he return to London for immediate surgery, warning that pushing forward could worsen the damage. Instead, Ford decided not to stop production, but to bandage the injury, medicate himself, and continue acting. You can spot limping or a slight tilt of his leg in many scenes, not necessarily as part of some character, but actually because he worked through pain. Though on other levels, it saved a lot of time and money, but above all, gave an unexpected added dash of grit and exhaustion to Indy, which felt so very real. This kind of perseverance itself becomes a part of the legend. That would have benched most actors, but would not have grounded one of the toughest heroes in cinema history. Sweat, limp, and the raw physical stuff. This is more than mere acting. Ford poured in his very own injury into the role. In a movie renowned for its gallant stunts and grand sets, perhaps one of the greatest feats was just the sheer determination of Ford to soldier on, even with injury. Anything worth having is worth shooting for. Explosion went too far. One of the most jaw-dropping moments in Raiders of the Lost Ark involved a full-scale Nazi flying wing exploding in the middle of the Tunisian desert. This wasn't miniatures or CGI. The production built a life-sized airplane complete with a steel frame, spinning propellers and functioning parts. The sequence was designed as a centerpiece battle scene, with the plane going up in a massive fireball. Everything was meticulously planned, from stunt choreography to pyrotechnics. There was only one chance to get it right. But when the explosives were in use, it was big trouble. The fireball was so big, bigger than expected, almost blew apart the set with real force. The shockwave was so effective that it made members of the crew run for cover, and even debris fell raining in all directions. After a few tensed moments, it was quite unclear whether everyone had made it out. Luckily, however, no one was hurt. Rather, the blast left the set charred and kind of unconscious, actually proving how real that danger could be on this production. Instead of reconstructing the destroyed airplane, Spielberg simply allowed the mess, all of it, to stand. All the burnt wreckage would now serve as a backdrop, a visual reminder of the risks they were taking in order to render this film that much more visceral and explosive. That was more than just a spectacular moment. It was an instance of accidental intensity that investigated the full energy of the film. Sometimes it is the near misses that render a scene absolutely perfect. Star Wars Easter eggs. George Lucas couldn't help but sneak a bit of his galaxy far, far away into the world of Raiders of the Lost Ark. As the creative force behind both Star Wars and Indiana Jones, Lucas saw an opportunity to blend his two iconic universes, if only subtly. Hidden deep within the Well of Souls set are carved hieroglyphics featuring two familiar figures, C-3PO and R2-D2. They're not immediately obvious, but if you look closely at the background walls, you'll spot the beloved droids disguised as ancient carvings. These weren't arbitrary insertions, they were carefully placed pointers inside for those eagle-eyed fans who have been able to see it. And those inside jokes didn't end there. Within the first few scenes of the film, while Indy boards a seaplane to escape from angry villagers, the tail number painted on the aircraft reads OBCPO, an ingenious juxtaposition of Obi-Wan Kenobi and C-3PO. A first-time viewer would probably miss it. For those with a keen eye and appreciation for such details, it is gold. To Lucas, these connections weren't mere nifty Easter eggs. Rather, they spoke a deeper truth. Indiana Jones and Star Wars sail on the same mythic winds, hero on a quest, legendary relic, ancient secrets, and destiny carved in stone. Be it whip or lightsaber, desert temple or galaxy in chaos, Lucas's storytelling soul is unmistakable. These tiny tributes serve as winks to fans and a clever way to connect two epic adventures that are quietly, yet undoubtedly, unforgettable. That hat was engineered. Indiana Jones without his iconic fedora? Unthinkable. The hat wasn't just a fashion choice, it was a defining part of the character's silhouette, his rugged charm, and his instantly recognizable look. But while it looked effortless on screen, keeping that hat on Harrison Ford's head during the intense stunt work was anything but easy. Wind, sweat, jumps, and high-speed chases constantly threatened to blow it off mid-scene, turning this piece of wardrobe into a logistical nightmare. The costume department was creative, instead of gluing or using some awkward chin strap. They customized the inside of the fedora with a custom-fitted elastic band. A subtle but brilliant adjustment, tight enough to take whip cracks, explosions, and truck drags, but completely invisible to the camera. A relatively minor technical fix to a major problem while maintaining the illusion and grittiness that made Indy feel so real. Indeed, the hat transformed into more than an accessory, becoming, in itself, a character. Whether flying back into Indy's hand mid-action or holding completely still amid chaos, the hat helped solidify Indiana Jones's legendary status in cinema. That was movie magic. But the next one? It's pure nightmare fuel. Molina's Spider Chaos. Alfred Molina's big-screen debut in Raiders of the Lost Ark began with a nightmare scenario. Dozens of tarantulas crawling across his body. Playing Satipo, Indy's ill-fated guide, Molina had to walk through a booby-trapped cave while covered in spiders. His very first scene in his very first film. The crew placed multiple tarantulas on his back and waited for the creepy movement to begin. But something was off. The spiders just sat there, unmoving, ruining the tension the scene was meant to build. Spielberg was puzzled until the animal handler offered a surprising explanation. All the spiders turned out male, and as every male tarantula knows, he does not do much when surrounded by others. The answer? Add a female. One was placed on Molina's shoulder, and that changed everything. The males started crawling, scuttling away, even fighting. It made a beautiful, chaotic, and darkly unsettling picture, which was perfect for that scene. Molina, a newbie, remained petrified and brave, while the spiders went berserk around him. It was an instant full of genuine movement and menace, no special effects possible. Just biology, timing, and then the calm of a rookie actor under pressure. Borrowed Submarine from Das Boot. When the script for Raiders of the Lost Ark called for a full-scale Nazi submarine, Spielberg and his team were faced with a major challenge. They didn't have one, and they weren't about to rely on models or visual tricks to fake it. But luck was on their side. Just across Europe, the production of Das Boot, a major World War II film, had recently wrapped. Its massive, hyper-realistic U-boat set was still intact, detailed down to the rivets. Instead of starting afresh, the Raiders crew borrowed the existing sub, added fresh Nazi insignias, and framed it just right for the camera. The result was convincing, cinematic Nazi sub that looked like it had come right out of the history books. Then one added scale and authenticity to Indy's stealthy escape, and it also became one of those rare moments when one great film literally handed another the perfect prop. This is part of the most creative and collaborative of movie making. Facemelt nearly lost the PG. Audiences who went into Raiders of the Lost Ark expecting a fun, family-friendly adventure got far more than they bargained for during the film's explosive climax. When the Ark of the Covenant is finally opened, divine wrath unleashes a grotesque spectacle. Nazi villains scream as their faces melt, rot, and erupt in horrifying detail. For 1981, this was far beyond what anyone expected in a PG-rated movie. Theaters fell silent. Children screamed. Parents were stunned. The backlash was immediate, with the MPAA fielding a wave of complaints about the film's unexpectedly intense violence. The studio worked backstage, anticipating the worst that could happen. However, if the movie lost its PG rating, the audience would be limited, hence box office potential. Luckily, and quite possibly due to some influence, the movie sustained its PG rating with no cuts or any editing whatsoever. The face-melting scene was kept in and became as much a cultural landmark as anything else. More than that, it launched a national conversation about what should and should not be shown to younger audiences. The uproar from that movie, along with other extreme pictures from that time, created enough of a stir to warrant a new rating, which lay in between G and R, PG-13. So the face splinter did redefine the boundaries. Nazi monkey paw salute. One of the most chilling and unsettling moments in Raiders of the Lost Ark features a monkey in a tiny vest raising its paw in what looks like a Nazi salute. Though brief, the scene leaves a lasting impression, adding a bizarre and eerie twist to the film's portrayal of evil. Behind the camera, however, getting that shot proved incredibly difficult. The monkey refused to cooperate, despite the trainer's best efforts. They tried verbal commands, hand signals, and even an array of treats. But nothing worked to prompt the specific movement needed for the scene. The break was with a little clever trickery. A crewman held a grape from a fishing line just beyond the monkey's reach. The monkey, of course, put its paw up to grab the snack, and Spielberg shouted, "Action!" It took dozens of takes to get timing right, but in the end, they got the shot. The result was an unsettling but iconic picture that served to remind viewers that in Raiders, even the animals could be a part of the darkness. Boulder sound wasn't stone. Yet few scenes in film history are as instantly recognizable as the opening boulder chase in Raiders of the Lost Ark. The tension is palpable as Indy sprints from a massive stone sphere hurtling toward him, the sound of it rumbling like an avalanche through ancient corridors. But that terrifying sound wasn't a giant boulder rolling at all. It was movie magic, crafted by legendary sound designer Ben Burtt. Rather than rely on what a real stone might sound like, Burtt layered more aggressive and visceral effects to create something that felt colossal. He started with the sound of a distant car traveling on gravel, then mixed this with the sounds of thunder to provide strength and menace. Then, to create a bigger sound, say something like a boulder booming out in the theater, he put his mix through some echo chambers. In a stroke of brilliance, the sound did not so much imitate reality as it made the audience feel like the boulder itself was hunting them down. An apt demonstration of how sound design in Raiders operated not only in conjunction with the visuals, but raised the threat to the level of the myth. The Ark was locked between takes. To Steven Spielberg, the Ark of the Covenant wasn't just another movie prop. It was sacred. From the start, he insisted it be treated with reverence and mystery, as if it truly held divine power. Between takes, the Ark was literally locked away. No peeking, no casual glances, and absolutely no treating it like set dressing. Spielberg wanted everyone on set to regard it as something dangerous and unknowable, building a sense of awe that would seep into the performances. It worked. As the filming continued, the cast began to confess that they felt a little weird around the Ark, as if the magic had gotten into real life. That tension carried over into the final cut. When the Ark is finally opened in the film and all hell breaks loose, the fear on the characters' faces doesn't seem manufactured. It's earned. Spielberg didn't just direct the moment, he engineered the emotion behind it. By making the cast believe in its power, he made the audience believe as well. Nobody expected a hit. When Raiders of the Lost Ark was first conceived, it wasn't expected to change cinema. It was just a passion project. Spielberg and Lucas set out to make a throwback to the Saturday matinee serials they loved as kids, complete with cliffhangers, exotic locations, and an old-school adventurer. The studio didn't expect much, and even the casting felt like a scramble. Harrison Ford wasn't the first choice for Indy. But what began as a nostalgic experiment turned into a cultural phenomenon. The film premiered in June 1981 and then went on to catch fire at the box office. The thrill of its blend of action, humor, and myth filled theaters with moviegoers of all ages, week after week. It was the year's top-grossing movie, earned 9 nominations for the Academy Awards, and won 5 of them, including Best Editing and Best Visual Effects. Above and beyond the awards, the film gave birth to a franchise, operating sequels, comic books, theme park rides, and numerous imitations. What nobody foresaw is that Indiana Jones would not only be an on-screen hero, but a representation of adventure itself. Truck drag was real. One of the most jaw-dropping stunts in Raiders of the Lost Ark comes during the legendary truck sequence, where Indiana Jones climbs aboard a moving vehicle, fights his way toward the front, and ends up being thrown underneath, only to cling to the undercarriage and drag himself back up. What many fans don't realize is that this sequence wasn't movie magic or clever editing. It was real. Harrison Ford performed the entire stunt himself without a double. The inspiration came from the 1939 classic Stagecoach, where legendary stuntman Yakima Canutt executed a similar maneuver under galloping horses. Spielberg wanted to pay homage to that moment, only with modern stakes. To execute the stunt, the crew excavated a narrow trench in the roadway, just deep enough to safely allow passage of Ford's body while the truck rolled overhead. Ford wore a harness, which concealed him and protected him from some injury, but did not interfere with his mobility. There was no room for error, and they had only one chance to get it right. As Ford slid beneath the vehicle, mere inches from the spinning tires, he breathed in dust and grit. It is a scene that has astounded viewers for decades, not because it looks real, but because it is real. In that moment, a movie legend was not contrived, but earned. 7,000 live snakes. To capture the terror of the Well of Souls scene, Spielberg insisted on authenticity. No fake snakes, no visual tricks. That meant calling in professional wranglers who arrived with crates and bags filled with thousands of live snakes. Over 7,000 slithering creatures were dumped onto the temple floor, creating a moving, hissing nightmare. Harrison Ford had to march right into the chaos, surrounded by real reptiles. His fear written not just into the script, but into his face. One very real moment on the set almost turned to calamity. When Karen Allen was crouched on the floor for a shot of the Well of Souls scene, a cobra lunged back and struck towards her. Fortunately, a piece of practically invisible plexiglass, installed as a safeguard, stood between her and the hungry snake. The barrier did its job. She was safe. In the final cut, if you look closely, you may still see the faint reflection of that glass, which now serves as a deep yet subtle reminder of the very real threats going on behind the scenes. Whenever Spielberg wanted real terror, the set provided, acting was totally unnecessary. One hat defied gravity. But coming up next, it's gravity you'll wish didn't work. Karen Allen caught fire. In the fiery barroom brawl set in Nepal, chaos was always part of the script. Bottles flying, guns drawn, flames licking the set. But for Karen Allen, who played Marion Ravenwood, one rehearsal almost turned deadly. As she practiced her dramatic escape, her costume accidentally brushed a flame and caught fire. A streak of fire shot up her back, and for a few terrifying moments, no one on set realized it wasn't part of the stunt. Allen was literally burning on camera. A crew member hurried in and extinguished the flames before she could sustain any major injury. However, it was Allen who went to the filming location visibly shaken despite having sustained no injury. The raw emotion she carried into the last shot was not pretend, but fully infused with adrenaline from a brush with real danger. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into Raiders of the Lost Ark, make sure to like the video, drop a comment with your favorite behind-the-scenes moment, and subscribe for more hidden movie gems. Don't stop the adventure. Click the next video on your screen to uncover even more movie secrets you never saw coming.